Hi, good morning, everybody. And we will start with Michelle giving a little overview for today, etc. Please go ahead, Michelle.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Melissa Matthews, Michelle's twin sister. Some of you have seen me on the sessions before, usually rapporteuring, just filling in while she tries to get back on. So we usually start our sessions with community agreements. If this is your first time here, I'm going to read out the community agreements, and if you have anything to add, you can do so at the end. So it says here, let's agree to do the following in order to maximize our class time, participate actively, fully by sharing our experiences and or answering questions, limiting our contributions to 2 to 3 minutes in the plenary discussions, when possible to allow everyone to actively participate, limiting distractions near us, communicating when we have to step away from our computers, especially when you're in the small group breakouts, and listening to our colleagues for understanding, being respectful even when we disagree. And is there anything anyone else would like to add? If not, I will move on. So for today, we are going to be covering monitoring and evaluation tools and recommendations, how to make a movement, building our communications teams, and timeframes for implementing our communication strategies and action plans. It sounds like a lot, but it's simpler than you might imagine. So what we wanted to do first, though, is clear the air and see if anyone had any questions or anything that about what was covered up to date. I wasn't here for the last session, so I don't know if you all received any questions via email or if anyone had any questions lingering from the last session that they'd like to tackle before we get started.
So I believe the only email communication was between Ian and Michelle, and that was specific to Thinkific, I believe. If anybody has any questions on the topics we discussed last time, where I think we had elaborated a little bit on the target audience and our messages. But is there any question anybody would have to raise? Melissa works in the same company with Michelle, so both of them are expert communicators, and Melissa can provide some guidance. So if anyone has any questions, if not, we can proceed to Emini, which is the focus for today. Terrence, go ahead.
Hi, morning. Just a quick one. I was able to log into Thinkific up to yesterday, but I'm seeing only the materials from the first workshop, the first day. Is that how it's supposed to be?
No, we should have had, it should have been up to date.
Yeah, it should be up to, oh, sorry, Natalie.
Michelle is back. Go ahead.
It should be up to date for Terrence. Maybe check again today and let me know if you're seeing up to date for. If not, I will go in and see if there's an issue with publishing.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Where did we leave off, guys? Sorry. Go ahead and get into Emini. We were just reviewing if there were any questions from last time. Oh, okay. Were there any questions? No?
Nope.
Okay. Well, Anastasia, can you turn to the first slide after in today's class, please?
All right, so Anastasia, given Michelle's issues, if you can share, and I know you'll need a minute to share.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And please bear with us, everybody.
Yeah, apologies for all the one before this. I think it's slide 6. Yes. Okay, so as we all know, monitoring and evaluation is a big part of launching an effective campaign. If you're not monitoring what you are doing and evaluating whether or not it's effective, it would be difficult to ascertain your impact and whether or not you're actually wooing or swaying people to take action, and how that action is affecting the underlying issue that you're trying to affect. So in the cases of the 2 communications campaigns we're working on through this class, you know, if we are not monitoring who and how people are getting the messages about debushing, or how the minister is receiving our messages on the mangroves, then how can we know if our campaigns have been effective? So in order to effectively monitor and evaluate our campaigns, we have to develop indicators, or what are typically known as success indicators. So we will dictate qualitatively and quantitatively what we're looking at to determine whether or not the actions we are taking are successful, or do we need to pivot or flex and try something else to get our messages to be better received and acted on. So just really quickly, you know, once we know where we're starting, we have like a baseline of what is happening and how people are responding to certain messages, then we can go ahead and develop indicators. We know what our messages are by and large and who we're targeting. So now we want to develop those indicators. So indicators can be very simple. There are activity indicators, number of people that we targeted for an event, the number of topics covered in a workshop or a training, the number of events that we held, how much money we spent can also be an indicator, right? Those are activity indicators. Short-term indicators will be, and which are a little more difficult to research or ascertain. So we have to be very careful with short-term result indicators about how we are gathering the data. But the number of people who heard about the issue, the number of copies of outreach material that we distributed, the number of people who participated in an activity versus how many people we invited to the activity, how far has our message reached, and the number of people who attended, retained information, and were able to act on the information, right? So it requires, and I guess this is no secret to anyone on this call, that monitoring and evaluation requires quite a bit of research, follow-up, and having people and measures in place to get the data that we need. Next slide, please. Medium to long-term indicators. So these are more so indicators we'll be looking at over a sustained period of time, the number of people who actually changed behavior as a result of the campaign, the number of people who became champions or advocates or agents of change as a result of your campaign or of our campaigns, and any policy changes that were enacted as a result of the campaign, which obviously is an indicator that the mangrove group would be looking at if we are advocating that there be policy on how to treat with mangroves, and we would like the minister's support for that. Next slide, please. Determining desired outcomes and indicators based on objectives. So we set a number of goals for our campaigns. I think we each set 1 to 2 goals for our campaigns. And obviously we have desired outcomes, right? If one of, I'm still unclear about this point, so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're talking about the mangrove campaign, a desired outcome is that knowledge is built in the minister, right, and his team, and that they act on it by putting forth legislation or signing on to legislation that supports what we would like to happen, right? Indicators for whether or not, oh, go ahead, Natalie, were you gonna correct me there?
For that one, it's less about the legislation. We do want to instill a little bit of knowledge and understanding, and perhaps that knowledge and understanding towards the conservation of mangrove. So it's not only about legislation. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah. So particularly in the instance of the minister, this first indicator here is especially important. People speak in a knowledgeable manner about the issue. I think that is a key indicator for that project, if the aim is to build knowledge in the ministry and with the minister in particular about mangrove conservation. So if he or she can speak knowledgeably on the matter, and knowledgeably enough to have developed his or her own perspective, awareness being built could be a potential outcome, wider awareness amongst, if we stick with that same example, amongst parliamentarians, amongst staff at other ministries, and amongst their constituents. Next slide, please, Anastasia. Okay, so when I've talked, I think, briefly about this when this topic came up earlier in the course, and I really wanted to touch on it again today because it's important that we recognize that when we're looking at Emini, or when we're looking at the data that we want to use to inform our communications campaigns, that we're both looking at qualitative data and quantitative data, right? So the difference is that qualitative data measures opinions, attitudes, and behavior, whereas quantitative data can feel more tangible and easier to pin down because we're dealing with numbers, we're dealing with figures, the number of people who attended, the number of people who we invited, the number of people who connected with other people about the issue, right? Qualitative data is far more difficult to measure and pin down because you're dealing with people's attitudes and opinions and maybe body language and how they are expressing themselves. And so it can be a little different, harder to measure, but it's still important, and it still very much does impact our outputs and our outcomes. So ways that we can evaluate qualitative data by asking open-ended questions, having focus group discussions, capturing things in written documents, observing how people act and what they say and what is shared. As I said, quantitative evaluation measures can feel quite a bit easier to ascertain. How many people did we target? How many workshops did we hold? How many people are aware? How many people in a particular community are aware of the impacts of our issue? How much communications material did we produce, etc. Questions or concerns about developing indicators or the difference between qualitative and quantitative data and evaluation before we move forward. I can't actually see hands or anything, but I don't think any hands are raised. Am I correct?
Yes, that's fine. Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, Anastasia, we can move forward. Thank you. Okay, so as we think of how we develop our Emini for our projects, I developed a simple tool that we can use that helps us kind of lay out what we're measuring for. So we would list the goal, the indicator, the definition of the indicator. So how do we come to that? I'll go through the example after I say the different parts, right? The baseline, where do we start? The target, where do we want people to end up? The data source, right? How are we collecting the information and who's collecting it? Where are we getting it from? Frequency, how often will we measure for these particular indicators, and who's responsible for doing the measurement, and where will we report about it? So in the sample, it is the Escazú Agreement campaign. So the goal is the ratification of the Escazú Agreement in Trinidad and Tobago to help enhance environmental protection in the country. The indicator was, and obviously this is really a high level, signed, ratified agreement and public notice from the office of the PM. How's it calculated? One signed, ratified agreement and public notice. Baseline, where are we starting? The government participation in drafting the agreement, and public international acknowledgement of its importance. We hoped to be starting from there, actually. I don't think we've gotten acknowledgement of its importance. I mean, I guess, yeah, we did start from there, but nothing happened after that point. The government did participate in initial drafts, and that was it. What are we aiming for? Full government buy-in and support of the agreement by signing and ratifying it and making a public announcement or declaration to that end. That did not happen. The data source, how will it be measured? News media, official notice from the office of the PM. Frequency, weekly outreach to the office of the PM and relevant environmental agencies and ministries. That did happen for some time. Responsible team member, all team. Reporting and documentation, project progress reports, news articles, and press releases. So we did very much monitor via progress reports, any press that was garnered, news clippings. There was, though, no celebration of the goal being achieved because it was not achieved. And I think at some point we revisited our aim and decided to put the bulk of our efforts into the regional campaign because some of our colleagues with our support were gaining far more traction with their governments, which ultimately worked in St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, if I'm not mistaken, and a couple other places. Not all of our regional partners, but quite a few. Questions about how to use this tool or whether or not it's helpful. Please keep in mind that in terms of building Emini, in particular for the 2 communications campaigns, Natalie and I are working on giving you some support through our team. And so I would really be building out the framework and filling in this part of it. But I want to make sure that everyone still understands basically how you would use a tool like this, and hopefully you can apply it across the board in other campaigns you're using. So if something is unclear about how to apply the tool, please let me know now so I can clarify. Questions, concerns, challenges about this tool in particular? Nothing? Going once, going twice, going 3 times? Okay, Anastasia. Okay, apologies, guys. I was trying to fit a lot on one slide, so apologies if anything is hard to read. I'll go ahead and read everything out to make it easier. So I'm just making some simple recommendations for what indicators we should set for the 2 campaigns. Obviously, I'm putting them out to you so that we can garner feedback and you can say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't agree, or we think we need to add X, Y, or Z. So as a starting point, what Emini measures should we embrace or take on board for our mangroves campaign? I'm saying quantitatively, let's monitor the number of meetings or direct correspondence with the minister, the number of meetings or direct correspondence with the minister's advisors or influencers. If there is legislation, number of actual votes in favor of the bill, policy, legislation we're championing, number of times the minister mentions talking points in a public meeting or forum. So specifically, I didn't think I had to say that, but just in saying it, let me clarify that I specifically mean talking points provided by us, those of us working on the mangroves campaign, or some modified version of the talking points provided, the number of times the minister addresses the issue in parliament referencing talking points provided, number of times the minister or technocrats from the ministry mention talking points on media, and media can be, sorry, I'm just seeing Adrian's comment here. The middle set of indicators implies a lot of monitoring work across different media. How much of an issue is this? I'm unclear on the question, Adrian. How much of an issue is monitoring the different media? Or
yes, yeah. So I mean, looking at your indicators there, number of times minister mentions talking point. Now you would, I'm guessing that you would be looking at what was mentioned on things like the radio. It could be mentioned in the newspapers. It could be mentioned on LinkedIn. It could be mentioned on, I know, any of social media platforms, and all of these 3. So there's a lot of media or mediums that this could come up on. And if you're wanting to build from these ones, quantitative, quantitative indicators, you're implying actually spending an awful lot of time, and you may not actually capture everything that's out there. And I just wondered, from your experience, how do you handle this?
Okay, so we handle it in two ways, right? And Melissa, you can back me up or not. You can share your perspective on this as well, right? So some things are easier to capture. So mainstream media, even local or regional, is easier to monitor because you can set Google and Yahoo News alerts, right? And you can use geographic location to pinpoint the country or the area you're specifically interested in.
Right.
Are you guys
Yeah,
hearing me?
you're breaking up
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got noticed that my internet was unstable, so I got nervous.
Yeah, you were a little, was breaking up a little bit, but I certainly got the gist of what you were trying to say.
Okay. So Google alerts and Yahoo News alerts and any service like that really helps. It is free. You can go into your email and set those up. And so if you guys are unfamiliar with how to set those up and you want to know, that's something I can cover in the next session. Because that's fairly simple. In terms of monitoring the social media, there are also tools available depending on the platform. So I know when we, for years and years, we used Twitter as a big place to kind of inspire discussion and like get people amped up about issues we were advocating for. And there was a platform called TweetReach, or a tool called TweetReach, where I could put in my hashtag and see how many people mentioned my campaign, how many people were using my messages. I have not used that particular one in a while, but I know that there are other measuring tools
that still exist. Also on Facebook, doing a hashtag, doing a mention search using a hashtag will bring up a number of results as well. It's quite easy to do.
Right. So in saying or knowing that these are things we want to monitor ahead of time, what you would do is make sure your social media messages have a hashtag, right? That you can easily search and figure out. So it makes it a lot easier. It is still a bit time consuming in that you do have to have someone who's paying attention to those things, but it's not like you have to search the platform by scrolling through your feed and looking for different pages. If you plan ahead of time that these are tools you want to use, and you use them effectively by using hashtags and keywords, it should be fairly easy for you to monitor mentions.
You can build hashtags into your messaging, and when you're planning out your key messages and stuff, you should build those things in. If you plan to use social media or other types of media like that to do your monitoring and evaluation, you want to build those things into your messaging. So for the group that's doing the signs, make sure you have the hashtag printed on the sign as well. Or
right. Now you're talking. Something has come back into my memory from a few years ago. I think, Natalie, you and I possibly worked on it when we did some, I can't remember, but there's a piece of software that will take the outputs that you're talking about and put them into social network analysis. What was the program? Gephi was one, GEPHI. So that's a step beyond what you're talking about now. I've just remembered it as you were talking, that it's something that will take the feed, you know, you set up, as you've just been saying, to harvest these mentions on the various social media platform, and then you can import that into the software to do it like a social network analysis, which will tell you who's mentioning what, and how often, and things like that.
Yeah, there are quite a few tools like that. Natalie, thanks, Adrian. Natalie, you have your hand raised?
No, just to tell Adrian, interestingly, I was thinking about that piece of work recently, but yes, it was to try and identify connections and linkages, including, I think there was some software involved, but it's funny that you mention it. It's in my mind. It was a network analysis of water sector players, I believe was the study we were working on. But
that's right. Yeah. Yes. Your memory's better than mine now.
That's not good, Adrian, if my memory is better than yours. Oh, please continue, Michelle.
Go ahead, Hayden. Hayden, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that I have a limited experience with the hashtag and stuff, but the use of hashtags strongly depends on, places a lot of the responsibility on other parties, because you could create the hashtag, but if no one actually uses it other than yourself, then you have no data to collect. Am I wrong, or is it another way that it's used?
No, that is true, but I mean, it's true to an extent, right? But if people are interested in being a part of, right? If they don't want to, hashtags have kind of evolved in that in order for me to find the conversation I'm looking for, I need the hashtag associated with it, right? In order for people to see that I'm trying to contribute to this conversation, the hashtag is necessary, right? If I doubt people want to be like the tree Melissa and I referenced in the forest a few sessions ago that falls and no one hears it, right? So if I'm generally, I guess my thought, Hayden, is if someone is making the effort to comment on the work that you're doing because they want to be a part of, the hashtag doesn't really shouldn't be a barrier, isn't really a barrier to entry in 2022, right? If we were having this conversation in 2008, I would say, yes, you're spot on. But I think now
what it comes down to, Michelle, and this might be the underlying crux of Hayden's point, is that if your messaging is hitting the people you want it to hit, and if you are integrating your hashtags correctly, people will be using it because they understand that is how they join the conversation. So it comes down to how you integrate the hashtags in your campaign effectively, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, I understand all of that. It's just, for example, we can use either of our projects. And I'll be honest, none of the people that we plan to communicate with, I think I would rely on to use the hashtags.
Even if you're, sorry, Hayden, even if you are feeding them the message, right? Because, some people we're leveraging to become champions, right? And they want to be a part of, but maybe they don't know what to say. Often with online campaigns, you are feeding people the message, right? So you're saying, this is what we're trying to do, say this. And they say, okay. And right? So you include the hashtag in what you say. Right.
No problem. So as I said, it's an additional step that I had not contemplated originally. And now that you've explained it, but it does create an additional level, a tier of responsibility on other people to facilitate your Emini. In that, as I said, if there are any lapses or neglect in the system, then you don't get the accurate data you need to make your to assess and make your records. So I'm just saying that,
but it's the same as like if we ask people to fill out a survey, right? You are expecting them to give you the feedback you need to feed into your Emini systems. It's part of the system. You're not going to get everybody, but the hope is that you get 80 to 90.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
But that's a great point that you raised, Hayden, and probably one that other people are like, oh gosh, this is something else we have to consider. And you're right, it is. It is something else you have to consider, especially if you're leveraging social media for your campaigns. If you choose that you don't want to, well, then that's another kettle of fish.
Yeah, it's just as I said, my experience in Grenada is that we're definitely behind on the type of social media activity you're describing. And from my personal networks and experience, a lot of the hashtag usage, it's the folks, the people who, like yourselves, who are into media and into that sort of thing. But the average citizen just does not. So I'm just saying it all to say that there will be some, it will necessitate raising the competence and what's the word? Like business acumen, so social media acumen, raising the experience, training literally even that middle tier of people, because they become your activists. So you're not advocating directly. So then you have the responsibility to uplift that cohort of persons. So that's just my concern there. And that additional step needs to be recognized, resourced, and planned as well.
I mean, I think that's true, Hayden, but I also think it's true of most ways we try to engage other people to join us in something. So like you would not send people who are not familiar with the talking points or the messaging in to have a meeting with the minister because they could waylay your, your efforts. And the same applies on social media. It's just in a different form. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Good morning. I just wanted to say that we created a page for one of our groups, and don't ask me how this is done, right? But I was really impressed by it. I keep getting updates from Facebook saying how many people have viewed which posts, and how many people commented, and It kind of does the work for us on some level. But would that count as a kind of monitoring thing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Comments and shares and any additional comments that people make when they share your stuff falls kind of under quantitative data, but the number of likes, the number of comments, the number of shares, the number of saves, those are also qualitative indicators. Go ahead, Natalie.
I just wanted to address Hayden's point about the lack of social media. Hayden, like me, you're an old fogey. Is it the same, for example, with the youth? I mean, CYEN and so forth. I don't know if anybody could speak to that.
I can speak to it a little bit. I don't think it is, right? Even though I am not sure I am still considered young. But I would like to think so. But based on my experience working with youth groups, Natalie, I would say you're correct that they are far more willing to embrace and leverage social media and do what seems like it might be heavy lifting for some. They are willing to approach as though it's second nature. So I hope that addresses it. What are we wowed about, Adrian? Are we wowed about the fact that I may not be considered young?
That was shocking news to me.
I don't know if 40 is still considered young to actual young people, but
it's interesting what the definition of youth is, because I've seen definitions of youth or young people up to the age of 35 in some cases.
So what you're trying to say is that I'm still old. I'm still
no,
but I'm young old.
I would put it this way: it depends on your perspective. When you're looking back from my standpoint, then anybody younger than me is young.
Right. Understood.
But I think just as a general, on a more serious point, I think it can be a little bit misleading to classify everybody's familiarity with social media by age. There are some people that will take to it no matter what their age, and there are other people that will just say, no, I don't want to engage. So it's a little bit more complicated than we're sort of maybe making out.
I think we have to remember that everything is a multi-pronged approach. So we're not going to be solely reliant on social media. So there are other ways, but every tool of Emini is going to require some heavy lifting or some kind of work on our end, right? Whether it is people to fill out surveys or talking to people on the street and recording what they're saying, you are going to be reliant on people to be responsive in some capacity.
I think what you're saying is that if you are serious about monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness, you have to invest in that process. You can't just let it float over. You can't just let it float over. And the message you're bringing is, I think, or one of the messages you're bringing is, yes, if you're serious, you need to put effort into this.
Exactly. It can't be passive, you know, it has to be an active undertaking. So I think that about covers my suggestions in terms of quantitative data we should be looking at. What, if anything, did I miss in terms of quantitative data, mangroves campaign folks, that you think would be worth capturing for this campaign? Feel free to mull it over. Not trying to put anybody on the spot. You can always let me know, drop us a note in the chat, send me an email, or let us know when it comes up in discussion again. Can we move to the next slide, please, Anastasia? Okay, so for qualitative messaging, qualitative Emini measures, these are what I am suggesting. I could be off, right? So Natalie and the rest of the team who've really been focused on the mangroves campaign, please let me know what, if anything, else should be considered, or if something on this list doesn't work. So the minister's formal response in meetings, the minister's informal response in meetings, body language, off the record assurances, notes passed, anything like that, willingness to engage, meet with, attend consultations on the issue, formal updates from people who work in the ministry, behind the scenes chatter about the issue coming from people who are in the ministry. Not trying to make it seem like we're planting moles or anything, but we live in a very small society, right? And so at least I know in Trinidad that the degrees of separation are far less than 6, and people talk. So sometimes office chatter makes its way to people who are not of the office, but who have a vested interest in the issue. Go ahead, Natalie.
So I'm a little unclear how this links to the previous slide, for instance. If we can take a look back at that slide.
This is qualitative data, right?
Sorry, I got a little mixed up then. Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
So how these are like things you would take note of, right? But again, qualitative data is a little harder to ascertain. So it's really about how you engage with people and what you get from that engagement.
So like if we had to report on this, how would we say that? Would a statement be a minister acknowledged the issue in X meeting? That's the reporting.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or
minister
it was
met
reported,
with us. Okay.
Yeah, for some of the what seems like a little more clandestine things, like behind the scenes chatter, you obviously would not attribute a name, but you would say, you know what I mean, there have been reports that this is being discussed in this ministry, right? Through we got it from a third party. But those are still things that you want to note, because very much in our society, they have some weight or credence, right? Or credibility, right? Maybe you look for other things, like what are they saying publicly to verify or shore up what's coming out of behind the scenes chatter and insights. But I don't want you to simply dismiss it as a rumor when it could be weighted depending on the source. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
Anything else qualitatively that you guys think I may have missed? No? Okay, Anastasia, I'd like to move on to Emini for the debushing campaign. That's the next slide. Okay, so I am suggesting that quantitatively for the debushing campaign, based on the products and pathways or platforms that we decided on in the last class, that we look at the number of people who show up to the moving sign thing, if we stick with that, right? When we're debuting a moving sign in a new community, how many people show up? The number of meetings on the issue with people in the community, right? People, maybe we call the number of meetings with people who have complaints about, what was the issue again? With people's winds got stuck in my mind. Hayden, what was the issue?
Projectiles.
Yes, with projectiles being hurled at innocent citizens and their vehicles and property. Again, the number of media mentions about the signs and the messaging, the number of local rum shop owners, post office workers, and other local proprietors engaged via one-on-one conversations, the number of meetings with crews and supervisors, the number of meetings with the administrator, number of mentions on social media, number of reported incidents about projectiles damaging people or property as a result of debushing. Go ahead, Hayden.
Hi, I just wanted to make a less than specific comment on this particular slide, and that is, I've been a little confused along the way recently in the last hour of, I come from a project management background, and so in my mind, there's a difference between Emini for your project actions and Emini for the outcomes. But I see it seems to feel as if they're blended here, in that the Emini that you are showing us is both included. So it starts with the monitoring and evaluation of your tasks, and then rolls into the results of that task. Am I correct?
Right. So the Emini is two-tiered, right? Just as how you have described it, right? It's two tiers, right? So it's, you are monitoring and evaluating what you are doing, and then the resulting outcomes, right? Because you're trying to affect change. So how do we know if we're affecting change based on our messages if we're not monitoring the change that we want to see? Does that make sense?
No, I understand, but as I said, I just wanted to clarify that that is what it is, because as I said, for my world for the last 15 years, Emini was focused on the outcomes, whereas what your work was your work. You did your work. So if you said you were going to do these things, this is what you did, but you didn't monitor and evaluate that to be reported as part of Emini. That was part of more or less part of your workflow analysis and what have you, however you managed yourself. And then you monitor the results separately. But I'm just saying that if you were going to write a report under this scenario, your report seems, what you're showing us here is both aspects.
Yes. And the reason why that is because we are focused on impact, right? These communication campaigns are focused on impact, not just what we are putting out, but the result. The ultimate focus is the result, right? So we have to monitor both and report on both. Does that make sense? It's an impact measurement. Go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, just to jump in to say, most of us here are in fact project managers. So yes, to speak your language, Hayden, it has both output and outcome indicators.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think both are useful. One in terms of the actions that we do that would be part of our work plan, and also the outcome is their change in behavior and so forth. I mean, and as we know, it's easier to monitor the output, the number of meetings and so forth, versus monitoring the number of crews that have changed behavior, you know. But I think this is fine. It's okay that it's blended. If we want to be a little OCD, we can split them up into output and outcome level indicators. So just saying that I understand where you're coming from, and yes, okay, thanks.
Absolutely. And actually in reporting, they are listed as outputs and then outcomes, right? So it's not, but we're doing simple strategies here. So I didn't want to get too drilled down into how everything is broken out in reporting, which is why I blended it. Yeah, but thank you for making that point, especially if it was causing any confusion to anyone else, Hayden, or not confusion, but just kind of like, why is she throwing everything in together? Yeah. So Natalie, is that an old hand? Okay, it is.
But just to say, Adrian has a question.
No, he made a point.
No, not a
Point?
question.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Apparently, my brain isn't working too well this morning. I'll shut up now.
That's okay.
No,
So
please don't do that, Natalie. We
Adrian
love hearing
said
from you.
in the chat he wasn't able to I wasn't able to be in most of the last discussion. It seems to me that this Emini would include quite a lot of qualitative work before the start to establish a baseline, and then after to see what changes emerge as the campaign goes along. And that's absolutely correct. If there isn't, so what we will often do before engaging in something like this, Adrian, is a CAP survey or some kind of focus group to get to help us establish a baseline, right? If that hasn't been done, but those who are carrying out the campaign are familiar enough with the issue and have been studying and monitoring it for some time, instead of the CAP survey or the focus groups, you can kind of rely on your lived experience with the issue. And then if it bears out that your experience does not give the full picture, then you can pivot and flex along the way. But obviously best practice is to do some kind of CAP survey or baseline study or focus group before starting the work.
Yeah. I suppose one of the things that occurred to me is that it's perhaps one of the differences between the quantitative and the qualitative. So with the quantitative, things like number of meetings with unit administrators, number of meetings with crews, you can just cite the numbers of meetings that you've had. Whereas when you're talking about a number of crews that have changed behavior, well, that is a very interesting way of putting that. I would thought you would go and talk to the crews maybe beforehand,
to get an idea of where they are.
Yeah, of where they are, what their understandings were, and then sort of, do semi-structured interviews or unstructured interviews with them to then look at, as you go along, see what they're saying. And then, same with the rum shop owners and post office workers and things like that. So just trying to make the point that with the qualitative, you can almost do it as like, no, I'm simplifying it, right. We just need to cite a figure. With the qualitative, you need to do a lot more work. You need to show what exactly is changing, because change behavior is quite a broad thing.
Very true. Very true. Thank you, Adrian. And in the chat, Ian has asked, what is a CAP survey? So CAP, K-A-P, knowledge, attitudes, and practices. So a lot of times, Ian, for knowledge, attitudes, and practice surveys, we would go into the community and talk to people in the community, find out what they know about the issue, what they think about the issue, and how they act in terms of in terms of the issue. And then we would determine, okay, for our campaign, we want to focus on this particular level of knowledge, we want to change this attitude, or we want to get people to act in this way or change their practices in this way. So it's really a way of getting a baseline of where people are so that we know how to move forward with the campaign. Does that make sense? Is that clear?
Not only does it make sense and is clear, but we've been doing it without realizing it.
Oh, excellent.
Without realizing its name.
Okay, excellent. I love hearing that. Anastasia, can we move to the next slide, please? Let's talk a little bit about qualitative measures when it comes to our debushing campaign. So remember we talked about targeting local rum shop owners and other proprietors who have day-to-day interactions with our target audiences. So I thought a lot about that when making these suggestions. Again, they're just suggestions, so you guys are free to validate or invalidate them and say, no, I think we should monitor X instead. So what I'm suggesting is that we monitor responses from local proprietors. How willing are they to pass the messages we are feeding them along, reporting back in the reports back from those people who have decided to engage, what were the conversations that they had with their patrons. The same with crew members, responses and body language from crew members and supervisors during meetings, responses and body language from unit administrators. I was really flailing a little bit on coming up with some solid qualitative measures on the debushing campaign. So if you guys have suggestions about what would be maybe better ones, I think these are still valid. I just don't know if they are as useful as some others might be, if you can think of others. So on that note, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, a beverage and or bathroom break, and we will meet you back here at 10:25. If you have any questions, concerns, or challenges around this slide and what was discussed just prior, please let me know. I'll be sticking around so you can either talk directly to me or put it in the chat. Yep.
Doing this, this qualitative analysis is quite it demands a certain set of skills to be able to do it and to have a knowledge of how you're going to go. It's not just reporting about it, but it's also the analyzing and pulling out
Exactly.
key messages. And I have actually done qualitative analysis before, so it involves things like coding, reading through the transcript. So there's a whole load of things here. How are you going to capture this information? Are you going to do it on a paper copy where after you've gone back and talked to people? Are you going to ask them if you can record them? Are you going to go back to them after you've recorded them and looked at the data and ask them to validate it? And there's a whole load of things that are involved in doing this properly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Adrian. And I think that if something seem more laborious than we have time for, or we think we can use more quantitative data that would be easier to ascertain.
No, I hear what you're saying, but to be honest, in some ways I prefer qualitative information because I think it gives you a richer and a better insight into what's going on. The quantitative is fine. It does give certain, indicators of what's going on. But I think in terms of understanding and helping you evolve, I think the qualitative, if done properly, is a very powerful tool to use.
But I agree with you, and I rely heavily, I think, in the campaigns that I do on qualitative data, but I think Hayden also raises a great point, right? Things like body language are really tricky and, you know, require people to be trained to understand what they're actually seeing and interpreting. And so maybe for a simpler campaign, it's not something that we include.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I remember when I was doing some qualitative research after I'd done sort of like an hour and a half interview with somebody, I would go away and before doing it would then sit down and write my impressions, not what had been said, but my impressions of what was going on and things like body language, the type of language that was being used, the amount of attention the person was giving, you know, whether they were distracted or not. So
what's interesting is that is also something that I readily do. I don't know if it's because of my background as a journalist and how I was trained in journalism school, but it is something that I do as well. So I take what people have said, right? But I also note how they have behaved, you know, because I think all of that kind of informs what's being said.
Yeah, no, it's a I used, in fact, one of the things I used to teach was qualitative analysis, which might sound strange coming from somebody whose first degree was in engineering.
Yeah, no, quite. I mean, I think it's really, really interesting data, but obviously something we have to be mindful of including in the Emini process, particularly if people don't know what they're looking at or are interpreting, are not validating their interpretations and are misinterpreting people's body language. But yeah.
Right.
So this is Brian here. I'm just on my other screen. I've been searching for and not finding really any literature on how to measure advocacy of policy. It's really weird. It's just, I'm not seeing anything. What you're presenting, I'm pretty sure you didn't think this up for this project. Has this been used before? Where? What lessons did we learn from that? Did it work? Background.
Sorry, Brian, you're a little muffled. Brian?
Yeah, let me try. I'll write it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're much clearer now if you want to try again.
It's remarkable how little I see in the academic literature on measuring progress to maybe like measuring the effectiveness of advocacy for policy change. I'm pretty sure you didn't think this up for this project. Where has this been used before? Did it work? What lessons were learned? Was it published? Is there a theoretical basis for this? And give me some background on where this comes from and does it work?
Okay, so yes, it's been used before. It's been, no, I didn't just think it up for this course. Methods have been used quite widespread, like in CSO or NGO lobbying and advocacy efforts.
Like which ones?
Issue-based communications campaigns. All of Canari's.
Okay, but give me an example where I can go and look at this and see it work.
Also, I've done, you can go to, I can send you some examples on Canari's website. I have also done quite a few effective campaigns. I used lots of these methods in the States when I worked for the hospice and palliative care lobby. So also when I worked in banking, right? So I worked for, are you familiar with the Main Street versus Wall Street campaign that came out in the States in about 2008 during the financial recession. Hello?
Yes, I'm familiar with the
Ryan.
campaign, but I'm not familiar with it being measured as successful.
Oh, of course. Okay. Well, it would have been measured as successful by those who, or sorry, it would have been measured by those who were implementing the campaign and would have had our various indicators for success. But if the data on that is available through ICBA, but again, for more local context or regional context, you can look at Canari's website. I can send you links to a bunch of campaigns that Canary has enacted that have used some of these methods and have seen successes as recently as the Escazú campaign with some of the countries that we targeted signing and ratifying as a result of the work that we were doing.
Please send me an example. I'm curious if those projects resulted in a successful change in how that policy was implemented and how that was measured by these methods.
Sure. Go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, just to say, remember, Michelle, where most of us are, well, a number of us are academics, so we like to see papers on literature. So if we can put together some of the Escazú stuff, maybe share it on Thinkific, or perhaps
Sure.
any other case studies that you have separate and apart from Canary stuff. Yeah, but we can chat a bit about more about that and try to get some literature and case studies to Brian.
Yeah, I mean, there's no issue in providing evidence that it works. I mean, this is pretty standard practice in the NGO CSO world, especially on UN, IDB, and EU funded projects. So there's no shortage of data on projects that this kind of approach has worked on.
Okay, I think everybody's back from the break. If we can continue.
Sure. So now we're moving on to we want to spend the second part of the class talking about your communications teams. And before we do that, we're going to look at actually a short TED Talk on how to build a movement to get us inspired and get our juices flowing about how to build an effective team.
Okay, so I'm sharing that. Just give me 1 second.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED, we talk a lot.
Can someone confirm they're hearing?
Yes, we're hearing, Natalie.
About leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course, you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not two nuts, 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So Over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that, TED. Thanks.
Okay, back to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Natalie. So just sharing, a little inspiration as we look to start talking about our teams. Who do we put in place to actually get these campaigns off the ground? Who do we already have in our ranks? Where do we have gaps? Where do we need more support? So Anastasia, can you please pull up my next slide? And we'll just give Anastasia a minute to share her screen. Yeah, thank you. So to make this process a little easier, we have built out profiles. Well, in the toolkit, we built out profiles for communications, campaign, action team members. And so I know it's a little small, so I will read them out. They're available where you can adjust the size and read them through yourselves. In the advocacy toolkit, I can also take this adjusted document and put it on Thinkific to make it easier for everyone to read and follow. So the roles we're looking at are the project or resource manager. The issue, I'm going to go through each one. So the project or resource manager, this member of the team has a bird's eye view of the campaign and all of its moving parts. They have a pulse on the resources available for the project and how they need to be dispensed in order for the project to have maximum or desired impact. This person is responsible for conveying the larger vision to the rest of the team, adjusting or pivoting the project's focus to align better with the reality of the circumstances on the ground. So this person is really keeping us on task. As Hayden and Natalie mentioned, there are quite a few project managers in here, so I don't think that I have to spend too much time on this particular profile because you guys know what is expected. Key technical skills, budgeting and financial management, human and resource management, project management, strong verbal and written communication and reporting. Soft skills, effective leader, personable, persuasive. So the issue analyst or the specialist and researcher, the person who knows the most about the issue at hand. This person is responsible for providing the rest of the team with extensive information on the issue, its history, locally and nationally in this case. This team member has an in-depth understanding of the issue and what gains have been made on it prior to the beginning of our efforts. This person can offer the team wider context for the issue and inform what may or may not be successful based on what happened in the past and what is happening elsewhere on the issue.
right? Key technical skills, research, data analysis, understanding of policy and legislation related to the issue, strong written communication skills, and a fast learner, someone who, soft skills, someone who's detail oriented. So, again, I did not mention this, but I think it's important to note that these are ideals, right? And not everybody on our team is going to match up with the ideal, but we want to get as close as possible, either on our teams or with our partner teams, to make sure that these roles are being fulfilled in a way that allows us to have a more effective campaign. So the third profile is of the beneficiary community outreach specialist. This team member is the face of the campaign or action to the beneficiary group.
This team member is the face of the campaign or actions to the beneficiary community and the team's liaison to the beneficiaries. They're responsible for communicating the needs of the beneficiary community to the rest of the team and ensuring that the communications efforts clearly reflect said needs. This team member is also responsible for communicating any shift in need on the part of the beneficiaries that may impact or change the direction of the communications efforts. They have a significant role in crafting the key messages of the effort or campaign. So the technical skills that they need are to have rapport and relationship building skills, data collection skills, conducting needs assessments, reporting, and strong verbal communication skills. In terms of soft skills, it's preferable that they be affable, insistent, patient, respectful, even-keeled, kind, and emotionally intelligent. Next we have the influencer. This team member is the face of the communications efforts to stakeholders in a position to aid the communications effort or campaign and help instigate the change we're trying to bring about. So they're responsible for networking, researching key stakeholders, developing rapport with and maintaining relationships with these target audience members at all levels. They have a significant role in adapting and tailoring the key messages to better appeal to the target audiences. They should have strong verbal and written communication skills, rapport and relationship building skills, research skills, situational analysis, and stakeholder analysis skills. They should also be affable, persuasive, patient, persistent, and respectful. My slides are going everywhere. Hold on. They should also be even-keeled and possess some level of emotional intelligence. They'll also be responsible for reporting and strategic planning. The impact and M&E specialist, this team member is responsible for monitoring the impact of our communications efforts. They are tasked with using agreed upon methods and frameworks to discern the impact of each campaign action and the overall impact of the campaign or the wider effort. This team member is keeping a close eye on what is working and what is not working, and what may be contributing to those results so that future actions and communications efforts can be tweaked accordingly. They should have a clear understanding of qualitative and quantitative methods, data collection, data analysis, and reporting. They should be detailed oriented and a fast learner.
Okay, that's fine. So I will speak to this part here. Okay. As per a suggestion from Michelle. But first of all, we'll be going into groups shortly. At DT, I think you will have to help Melissa in her group, and I will try to manage on the mangrove group by myself. But Anastasia, can you share the slides again, please? All right. So we've run this course a couple times before, and usually it's targeted at different NGOs working on their own campaigns, their own communication campaigns. So normally when we do these exercises, we have this NGO team in place where there's already a structure. For example, we know there's someone who's the head of the organization. There's usually a comm specialist. There's someone who does more analytic functions, some sort of monitoring and so forth. So as part of this course, because we're trying to do this in support of the Grenada NEA, we have actually started looking at 2 possible communication campaigns that we can implement next year, pulling in other members of the Grenada NEA team, including some of our authors, including some of our stakeholders and so forth, including some of you all. So we have this exercise to do, but I do not think we'll be able to do a very good job of it. We can talk through a little bit about it because of all of these challenges that I've just mentioned, that it's not just one NGO represented here, it's multiple people. And in no way are we trying to pin anybody down to any particular role on anything right now. So we can go ahead with the exercise a little bit and speak very, very theoretically for perhaps I would say a 10-15 minutes max in terms of what kind of people we might need for a mangrove campaign and what kind of people we might need for a debushing campaign. I see there's a hand up.
Yeah, Natalie, once you finish, please.
Oh, okay. Right. So like I was saying, please do not feel pressured by this in any way, shape, or form. There's nobody's name that's going to be put down here. Nobody's name is going to be mentioned either in the breakout group or in plenary. We're just trying to think through this theoretically. And as we have spoken, we're trying to develop these draft comms campaigns, which Michelle and I will be working on post this workshop, which we will give to you all to look at and give feedback on, and if possible, start working on if you all are interested. But we are also trying to incorporate this into our Grenada NEA uptake, which will be taking place around March, April next year. So I'm hoping that reassures you all that one, this is theoretical. It's going to be a 10-15 minute exercise. We're probably not going to do a very good job of it, but we're still going to go through the motions and we can have informal discussions. And if you all are able to assist in certain ways, March, April next year, or if you all want to start this sometime this year, we can discuss that informally. Aria, please go ahead.
Thank you. It was just also to indicate that we are also keen to have these draft products and to be able to disseminate them. So for sure, there is a hunger that we have. And I recognize that, you know, I apologize too, because PS asked me to open another meeting that started at 10 related to the Basel Convention. It's the first capacity building meeting that they have. So although I joined you all at 9, I did slip out for a short while. But again, I want to say that we are as hungry to receive these products, and certainly we can be a face and a target as necessary if people are feeling a little bit concerned about the direction of message and whether they're being put on the spot to deliver on specific things. Because certainly that's an important part of our mandate. And I would want to be able for us to have useful masters or useful templates if you want to reach out to a minister, if you want to reach out to a group that you think like a construction company, if you want to, so depending on who you want to reach out to with respect to mangroves, if you want to reach out to schools in the area, depending on what, we should be able to have that suite of templates that we can pull from and say, here you go, this is a start point to modify, not only for those who are present today and are lucky enough to join us online, but there are many other smaller community groups and youth groups who have bombarded us with requests for support. And again, I have to point out that I'm really grateful to Canary for the help, because we are not communication experts, but we are hungry for these kind of packaged results. So you can certainly put us in the crosshairs as necessary, Natalie. And the products, we are also hungry for to receive, to make available, and hopefully have them online in addition to them being online at Canary.
Okay, all right, great. So we have Aria's permission to put her department in the crosshairs, but we're not doing that to anybody else today. So, we can go ahead and proceed with the breakout group. I actually do not want to devote too much time to this. As I said, we can firm this up. Okay, so the schedule and current plan is we have our last session on Thursday. After that, Michelle will work to compile these draft campaigns, send out to you all for some comment, and then try to finalize and disseminate. And if necessary, between that period, we can have some informal discussions offline, and we can see how we can tweak this to provide general guidance with the recognition that come, let's say, March, April next year, you know, it might, the people, we have to promote the uptake of the Grenada NEA, and this is helpful to us as part of that to kind of focus it rather than just going to somebody and say, yeah, this is document, we have all this info, we have something focused to target with our different stakeholders. All right, so Anastasia, if you want to go ahead and put us in groups.
So I was going to ask Natalie if you could go ahead and share what happened in your group with our small group, and then what you guys came to, and then Melissa and Aditi can share what happened in the other group.
Okay, great. So I'm not sure if you were there when we actually did the group the introduction to the breakout exercise. And I was telling everyone that unfortunately, this will be a little theoretical because we have a number of NGOs, we're trying to not pin down anybody in the group to anything, knowing their different schedules, etc. We're not trying to, you know, name specific people, we're just trying to get a flavor for what this comms team could look like. And I did give the example that if you all are aware that this project is part of the Grenada NEA uptake, and as part of the Grenada NEA uptake, we're trying to uptake the entire document, and we are looking to do a comms campaign, perhaps, let's say, March next year. So for example, I could be a project manager because it's part of something I actually have to do. But then if we also, depending on if you all want to start working on this now, someone who's interested and wants to disseminate or share the comms campaigns, it could be a relevant ministerial agency, right? But whoever that project manager is, all the criteria that were in the table applies, budgeting, management. And as I was telling them, I'm literally trying to crunch numbers to see how we can pull this into the Grenada NEA, and then overall oversight and coordination, right? And then if the project manager, recognizing that sometimes a campaign could be one person doing everything, if the project manager, though, doesn't have in-depth knowledge of mangroves, they would need to rely on somebody who is an issue analyst or a specialist. And it could be, if we take a more general approach to be communicating on mangroves in general, it could be an expert on mangroves in Grenada. But then if we're trying to target down into particular sites, we need to pull in somebody as part of this comms team who is familiar with that site and perhaps has local knowledge to share, etc. Certainly, we're going to need somebody, maybe even somebody, one of the other two people we just mentioned, but somebody separate also possibly, who understands the communities that we want to work with and understands the culture, yeah? And certainly if we're looking for an influencer, tentatively, it could be someone who might be sympathetic to the cause that we want to communicate on, but someone who might be in a high level position, but we can bring them in, maybe somebody in the Senate or something like that. So those were our thoughts under the very the restrictions that I imposed on the breakout group. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Natalie, thank you for sharing. Over to you. Who's gonna lead the discussion, Melissa or Aditi?
I'll let Aditi start, and I can fill in any gaps.
Sure, no problem. So we actually took some notes instead of putting it straight into the table. We had a volunteer for the project resource manager or issue an analyst. We're not putting names, team member 1, not a specific, not a member of a specific CSO, but is willing to be involved. And team member 2, again, more in the background with as an issue analyst, focusing on qualitative and quantitative analysis. Some key points in the discussion we'll just go through here, but we recognize that the beneficiary or the influencer in Grenada's context may be the same person, small island situation, and it was noted that even with large CSOs, people often do double duty. Discussion in terms of the role of influencer was recognized that there was a need for a degree of legitimacy for that person when talking about issues on the campaign. And you would need to get someone who's comfortable in stepping out or being at the front of the campaign. We may not have these persons currently in our cohort, in our group. So ideally, we would like to get someone who used to be a supervisor of a crew who came up through the ranks to the role of a supervisor. They would have credibility or understanding of the situation and would be able to communicate with the debushing crews. The project manager can reach out to these persons, or Canary can provide any backstopping for gaps as well. In terms of the role of the impact and M&E specialist, again, this was a gap identified within our group, but we recognize that this person also has to be in the community doing work on the ground, having eyes on the ground to better able to understand what's going on. And because of these gaps, we suggested a need for a recruitment campaign to get more persons involved, to get different point of views and approaches. Canary can help here again, providing to help fill the gaps here. We can also reach out to other community groups who'll be willing to help out, for example, CYEN. But we also recognize that these positions we may not be thinking these positions, we may not be thinking about these positions officially as the official titles, because some CSOs often do these roles without having these official titles, these formal roles identified. So it's important to just kind of flesh out what we already have. So I think with that, I'll pass over back to Melissa in case to go through any other points.
I think Aditi hit everything quite thoroughly. There was a lot of identification of the gaps we have in our group and how we could stem those gaps. And so the big takeaway is that if we are going to be building a team that is going to execute this campaign, we're going to need to do some recruitment. We're going to need to fill some of the existing gaps in our cohort. So yeah, that was what came out of our group. Thanks, Aditi.
Yeah, thank you, Aditi and Melissa. I think under Natalie's tight constraints, and I do understand them, we discussed this ahead of time, that this exercise went really well. Based on the discussion that I was hit and miss therefore in the debushing group, I would say it was effective, and based on what was reported back, it seems like we're on the right track. So my internet seems to be stable for the minute, and so I will move forward and walk us through the next few slides. I'm hoping that I think we should act fast though, Anastasia, just in case it decides to give out. So if you could put up the slides for me, and I think start at slide number 19, which is the final slide in the deck. So we're going to talk a little while Anastasia gets up the slide. We are going to talk a little bit about time frames and what is the best time frame for us to launch these campaigns. What are some things we should consider before we launch when considering the time frames. But before we start that discussion, I'm curious if there are any questions, concerns, or challenges about putting a communications team in place. I just kind of want to do a pulse check on where everyone is with that. Does anyone have any like looming questions or concerns that need to be addressed before we move on to time frames?
Hi, yes, my question is legitimacy of the campaign. So for example, yes, I know the Canary is doing the NEA and stuff, but I just have had some experiences before. So ensuring that we do have complete authorization from the ministry, more authorization, yes, to go out and speak to the persons in the different groupings and to be representative of the project and effectively of the government. That's just my kind of questions, thoughts.
All right, thanks for sharing, Hayden. Go ahead, Natalie.
So yes, Hayden, it's a line I am very, very aware of. And we will be guided by our relevant project liaisons, and we will take every precaution as needed. Yeah?
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you, Natalie, and Hayden. So in terms of timeframes, when should we launch? When is the most advantageous time to launch these campaigns? I am really asking, guys, this is a discussion that I'm trying to facilitate with you here. I cannot tell you when the most advantageous time to launch these campaigns are. So I'm really trying to get that information from you. What would make whatever times we identify advantages for our campaigns, and what, if any, other factors should we consider? So does anyone want to kind of chime in here? Oh, Hayden has already chimed in. Debushing has cycles, so we need to obtain the schedule and think about it based on that. I think that's fair for the debushing campaign. Natalie, Aria, Hadasha, anyone else who is a part of the Mangroves campaign, what does advantageous timing look like for that campaign?
So my Grenadian colleagues will know of anything that's happening that's more pertinent. And recall, we will have these draft campaigns available for you all. If, for example, you all want to start to do something because some particular event is coming up, etc. From a project management standpoint, to link with the other project, which is the Grenada NEA, we might be looking more at March, April, or maybe a little later, depending on if the thing is delayed a little bit. So there's me from a project management standpoint, assuming that we are trying to link it to the Grenada NEA, but my Grenadian colleagues can think about if there's something that's coming up locally that would influence if you all want to start doing something December or January. But I see Chris saying that she agrees. But as I said, the campaigns will be available for you all to think about and use as needed in the interim. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. So if lining up with the NEA, we're looking at the end of the first quarter, the beginning of the second quarter of next year. Yeah. Did I read that correctly? Yeah. Okay.
If all goes well, yeah, there may be delays, you know, for example, if Adrian goes on vacation and doesn't write his chapter, you know, it could be December next year.
Harsh.
Sorry, go ahead, Rochelle.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Natalie. Claudette said it should not launch when we have other national or local events. Hello? Are you guys there?
Yeah, we're hearing you. We're hearing you.
Okay, I'm really not sure what happened. My screen blanked out, but so are there, Claudette, any local or national events happening during that time frame that you think will conflict with the campaign?
Well, I can't specifically say now because I don't have an idea of the calendar of events for 2023. But you know, we do have things as carnival and
right. So we should
village type, you know. I'm just making a broad statement there that
right.
we should take the calendar of events that have, because when people get caught up in things that they like to do, they don't listen to campaigns that doesn't affect them or reach them. So you have to catch them when they are not connected to any other activity. Yeah, just a broad statement I'm making. Yeah.
Yeah, understood. And to that point, we should be, I think Claudette is absolutely right that we should be consulting, you know what I mean, a national calendar of events and making sure that we're not conflicting with any major national undertaking that could divert people's attention. And I guess that is something you would consider when thinking about, are there any national happenings that could positively or negatively impact our efforts? On the other side of that, just 1 second, Chris, I'll turn over to you in a second. I just want to make this point. We should also be considering what on the national calendar kind of will make people more receptive to our messaging and buy in more to what we're asking them to do, so we can link the campaigns to those things in order to get more buy-in. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I agree with Claudette that we have to be conscious of the national calendar, but I think for me there's a big but. There's always something going on because practically every month is designated to something, you know, like I think March or April, I'm not quite sure, is Child Abuse Awareness Month, and then we have a month for the aged, and then we have a month, you know, there's something going on all the time. So I think we have to, you know, decide, yes, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it then, and prepare properly, prepare people, you know, that we want to drag in properly and thoroughly, and then, you know, and have a media on board. You know, so we need to plan it properly, and I don't think it'll matter then what's going on. If we do it properly, it'll fly.
I feel at this point, based on the facilitation plan for today, I think we've pretty much come to a point where we can probably stop, and hopefully we'll try and put some stuff in place for Thursday to see if we can avoid this issue again. So unless Michelle comes on again, perhaps we can close. But before we close, two things I want to do. I want to talk about the session that's happening on Thursday. Basically, Michelle will be doing a little bit of work trying to put together very draft versions of what we've done for the last 5 sessions, and have you all comment and make any additions to it during session on Thursday. And then the rest of the session will be a clinic where literally talk to us about communication campaigns you all have worked on in the past, get some advice, whatever you can think of to perhaps pick both Michelle and Melissa's brains. They are the experts in this to guide your own communication campaigns. So after Thursday as well, we will try and flesh out the communication campaign / strategies a bit more. And before Christmas, try and get some more feedback and tidy those up a bit more to be revisited, at least in our case, early or March or so next year, when we want to start actually doing some implementation. And we'll be having some informal chats with you all on that, recognizing that we're not saying wait till March. If you all want to talk to us or on your own, try to do start on some specific aspects, you are of course more than willing. The other thing, I think Aditi will be sending out an email if she hasn't already. On the 22nd, we're starting another workshop, and everything will be recorded in case you're workshopped out, but it's a resource where we'll be talking about developing knowledge products, and that's under another project. But if you all are interested in learning how to do photo journals or participatory videos or how to do better cell phone videos, we're also talking about things like GIS story maps and a bunch of other things. You all will be getting an invitation, but the recordings will also be there if next year, when your brain is a little cooler, after all these 1,000,001 workshops, to look at it and consider using that for different campaigns as well. Okay, Michelle, so you're chatting. Do you want to say anything before we do our feelings and check out?
I'm almost afraid.
Try.
Okay, so thank you guys for sticking with us through all of my techno blight. I did not catch most of Natalie's kind of wrap up, but I'm sure she told you that next week, this Thursday, we will work on a clinic. So if you have been having communications issues or campaigns that haven't quite worked or gotten off the ground and you need some advice, please come prepared to share those with us so that Melissa and I can offer some advice and guidance in that way. And now, also next week, we'll be asking you to do the end of course evaluation towards the end after we've done the clinic and everything. So yeah, I just right now would like to check in with everyone, see how you're feeling now that we have gotten through most of the meat of the course. And you've worked through a process of sorts. Can you let us know either verbally or drop in the chat, how are you feeling now at the end of this 5th session? Thank you again for your patience with my techno blight.
Michelle,
Yes,
I don't know, you don't have to answer it now. You can maybe do it another time or through an email. Earlier when you just started and I missed it, you talked about budgeting, the amount of money spent in the short term as an indicator to measure the impact of your comm strategy. I just wanted a little bit more on that, how budgeting and money spent is important. I wasn't able to grasp that. But you don't have to answer now, you can indicate to me.
Okay, I'll stick a pin and I will share that at the top of the next class, just because I would answer you individually, but I think everyone can benefit from the response. Does that make sense?
Yes,
makes sense. Michelle, it doesn't matter how you do it. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to go next, and I feel really, really excited, and I feel like we have a plan now. I feel like, you know, we have a focus and we know where we're going. So I'm really, yes, this has been really good. Thank you. Thank you, Nats. Thank you, Michelle and Aditi. And there was another person, Melissa. Brilliant.
Okay, excellent. Okay, guys, so on that note, we can end and we will see everybody on Thursday. Yes?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you.